I'm Ralph Willmington. I'm making this tape at the request of our daughter. I was born on a farm in south central Illinois, August the 4th, year of our Lord, 1911. Even the atheist acknowledges Christ's birth when he puts a date on anything, doesn't he? From the time I was old enough to remember anything, as I remember it now, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to raise purebred, milky shorthorn cattle. I can never sympathize with those who go up to college age and maybe start college and still don't know what they want to do. I dropped out of school when I was in the second year of high school. I never liked to go to school. I don't know exactly why. I never had any trouble there. I was classified as being in the upper third of the class, but I never liked school. I dropped out, not to loaf, but to work. I'd rather work than go to school any time. And my father had always had cattle, but not the kind that I wanted to raise. We each bought a female of the kind that I wanted, purebred, and a male in partnership with an uncle. We were fortunate in getting some heifer calves and were soon in the purebred cattle business. I was married to a sweet little neighbor girl in 1932. We started housekeeping on a farm that my father had bought just 2 or 3 months prior to our marriage. They tell us now that 1932 was in the middle of the Great Depression, but we didn't know that then. We just thought that was a way of life. We made a living and were just as happy as if we'd owned a gold mine. Hogs sold for 3 cents a pound and corn for 10, 11 cents a bushel. Now, we were still farming with horses in those days. I've walked many a mile behind a 2-horse walking plow. Nowadays, the farmers are getting 10 to 30 times that much for what they produce. And they go down through the field mowing a big swath with a machine that costs close to $200,000, some of them, but they can't make a living. The government has to subsidize them. I guess that's what you call progress. We were making out pretty good in my ambition to raise purebred cattle, and then something very unexpected happened. I'd been saved at 11 years of age, and for 4 or 5 years I had had some doubts. I wondered if I had done enough, not that I thought I could be saved by good works, but had I exercised the right kind or amount of faith. Eventually the doubts vanished, and I'm trusting completely and only in the sacrifice of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself a sacrifice to purchase my salvation, and a home that's glorious beyond our ability to comprehend. The Apostle Paul, took a trip, he tells us, to heaven one time. And he came back. He couldn't tell us much about what he saw, so I guess we'll just stay down here till we go up there to stay permanently. I never asked the Lord what he wanted me to do, since I'd always known. I figured there wasn't any need to bother him with that. I'm going to do quite a bit of abbreviating here. We were attending church regularly. I had been placed in the office of Sunday school superintendent in our little church. I got to thinking about some of the songs that we were singing there. I surrender all, and there was that one, I'll go where you want me to go, and so forth. I began to wonder if I should be singing those songs. Dr. Vance Havner said one time that there were more lies told behind a church songbook than any place in the world. However, I hadn't heard him say that until several years later. Anyway, I wasn't too much upset. I said I'm going to continue to sing those songs, but if the Lord wants me to do anything besides what I'm doing, he's certainly going to have to make it plain. As time went on, I became increasingly troubled. I hadn't said anything to anyone, but one day my wife said, "What's bothering you?" And when I told her, I said, "You know that I couldn't be a preacher." She said, "Well, I guess you could if the Lord wants you to." Well, I wasn't convinced, and my subsequent efforts in that direction would prove to the satisfaction of almost anyone I was right. But I can see now that the Lord had other plans, and what those plans were, I still had to find out. Back in those days, we were still harvesting corn by hand also. I liked that job. I kind of made a sport of it. I carried a watch. I would see if I could beat my time that I made the day before, or if I could beat the other fellow if I was working in the field with other men. I have topped 100 bushel a day a few times. Others could do that, but most couldn't. And some of the slow ones stop at about 60 bushels, but the average, I guess, would be about 75 or 80. But that fall, as I went up and down between the rows, over and over in my mind, whosoever shall save his life shall lose it. Whosoever shall lose his life for my sake shall find it. Whosoever shall save his life shall lose it. Whosoever shall lose his life for my sake shall find it. Well, you know, that gets old after a while. And by this time we had 2 children, a son and a daughter. We'd improved the farm buildings and the land, and up to now we thought we were sitting pretty. My father wasn't married until rather late in life. When I was born, he was getting up toward middle age, and when I was grown, he was close to retirement age. He turned the cattle business entirely over to me and most of the other farm work on both the place where we lived and where he lived, about 3 miles apart. Now, this was the hardest part of all. I told my father that I was going to write to Moody Bible Institute and see if they would accept me as a student. Maybe secretly, I hoped they wouldn't, but anyway, they did. I told him I would go there about 3 years. If the Lord had nothing else for me to do at the end of that time, I would come back. I'm sure the shock was extremely great. Never one to complain. He didn't manifest any emotion, pro or con. He had been very good to us, and it just didn't seem fair to treat him that way. Some years later, he said to me one day, he said, "Son, I hated like everything to see you go, but I'm glad that you did." I was accepted at Moody, so I just had a very short time to get ready, and I had to have a public sale, get rid of everything that I had connected with the farm. I left my wife and children on the farm. My wife's mother came to stay with them. Her husband, my wife's father, had been killed in an accident a short time before that. Moody has no accommodations for students with families. I had to find that myself. The first fellow I spoke to when I arrived at Crowell Hall was a man by the name of Sidney Peterson. "Where are you from?" "Waterloo, Iowa." "I left a wife and 2 children there. I'm looking for a place." "Where are you from?" "Downstate about 250 or 60 miles. Now, that much we had in common. We became the best of friends. He left a good job with Swift Packing Company in Waterloo. He should have made it to the presidency. He was a brain. We took some of the same classes together, and you know how it goes on examinations. Teachers always ask what you haven't studied, but once in a while you get a break and it goes the other way. I go to my mailbox and there's a paper, 96. Hey, that's pretty good. Just wait till I show old Pete this one. Well, I can't wait to find him, and "Hey, what'd you get on this examination?" Very modestly opens up his paper, 98, maybe 100. It was always, no exception, always like that. It's very discouraging, but sometimes you have to learn to live with certain things, and I learned to live with that. But I beat him out one thing. They told us when you make friends of those who are above you. Well, I certainly did that. He found a place for his family before I did. He rented an apartment where a graduating student was leaving. Now, I wasn't so lucky. That didn't sound like it anyway. It didn't feel like it. I looked and I looked. The term was ended, and the terms were much shorter then than they are now. And it was the last day. I was looking for an empty store building or anything. I had to have something. The farm had been rented and the family had to move. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the last day. And the next day I was to go back and get my family. To say that I was blue was putting it mildly. I was talking to the Lord something like this. I said, "Lord, this wasn't my idea in the first place. I could have lived and died, never even seen Chicago, and I don't think I would miss much." We were 3 miles from the Institute. We had an hour to get back. We were walking. My friend looked just as hard, and he never let me go alone. I don't know whether it was love for me or his duty unto the Lord to help me find a place, but we were through. About that time, we walked past an empty dwelling, 2-story, rather old house, and the fellow was walking out the door. And I said, would you rent part of that house? He said, no, I'm the realtor in charge of selling it. I hadn't thought of buying a house in Chicago anymore. I thought about going to the moon. At that time, no one had gone. I don't know if they're thinking about it or not. But anyway, I asked him, how much you want? He told me, how much do I have to pay down? He told me that. I don't remember either figure, but since I'd sold all that I had in connection with the farming, I had enough to make the down payment. I bought a house right quick. I had to go down to the Loop the next morning to close the deal, and I barely made it to catch the train. I think it was almost moving before I got on to go home. We moved into 4 rooms. There were 7 rooms downstairs. We moved into 4 rooms. I rented the other 3 to another student that had 1 child. There were 5 rooms upstairs, and I rented to another student that had 2 children. I had thought that I'd be the only old man there, but there was a lot of latecomers, and that was in my class. Anyway, the 2 renters that I had were very happy that I hadn't found a house to rent and I had to buy one. I charged them probably not much more than half of what they'd had to normally paid other places, but anyway, the rent made the monthly payments. When I sold the house, I got $500 more for it than I gave. When I had been figuring at the start, I had thought that even with working part-time, with rent and other living expenses, we would be just absolutely penniless at the end of the 3 years. So instead, as housing was concerned, we lived free. And the Lord threw in $500 for other expenses. Now, if that's not doing exceeding and abundantly above all that I could ask or think, I don't know what was. At graduating time, there was still nothing in view for my future. Again, right a last-minute thing. And I promised my father I would come back if I had nothing else to do. Well, as I remember it now, it hardly entered my mind that I would be going back. I don't know why, but it didn't. So right at the last minute, a fellow from Kenosha, Wisconsin had come there to go to school. He came to me and said, a man up in Kenosha had started a mission there up on the north side of the city, and he'd become ill, and he couldn't continue the work. Nobody else seemed to be available. And he asked if I would be willing to go up and see if I would like to take over. Well, needless to say, I went. It was just an accident that of all the students that we had graduated, about 150 of them, I think, in that class, that I would be the one that he'd asked. Well, by now I had gotten rather used to the Lord running things, so I guess I wasn't too much surprised. There were about 30 or 40 attending the mission there, mostly children. There were 3 adult couples. One of the men of those were not saved, and there was only 1 woman in the group who could teach. But children were my wife's specialty. She had been teaching before we were married. She taught daily vacation Bible school in the morning when we were married in the afternoon. I have to stick with adults. You know, you have to be good to teach children. If not, they're up hitting each other over the head with chairs and so forth. But adults are usually polite enough not to do that, even if you're really a little dry and uninteresting. Anyway, we were pretty much chief cook and bottle washers for a while. But the Lord blessed our feeble efforts. We improved the facilities, and best of all, we had several saved. Contrary to custom, most were adults. We had some unusual conversions. One was a very devout Roman Catholic, 19-year-old young man. I encountered him first in the hospital. After I had talked to him there one night, he was rather perplexed about some of the things I'd said, so he called for the priest to come and get him straightened out. Well, the priest was too busy, so he didn't come, but he sent one of the sisters. That kind of insulted him. He thought his problems were worthy of the attention of the priest. But after he got out of the hospital, I visited him again. And eventually he accepted Christ as his Savior. His family were very devout Catholics. They turned him out. They never had any more to do with him from that time on. But he went to Moody, and he later worked there for a while, and then he went on to pastor a church in Ohio. Before his death, he came back to the mission and was pastor there when he died. I'll have to go back to where we were. I say when we started, we were having about 30 or 40, but the attendance had come up to about 100, maybe a little over. We were averaging around 100. And we decided to organize into a church. That we did. Then they decided they could support me full-time. I guess they thought if I devoted full-time to the work, it would really grow, but it didn't grow very little, if any. I was unhappy, and so were they, and I didn't blame them. I felt that I should step aside, so I did. And now I go back to Moody again. When we were there, we were given assignments to minister in different areas of the city. I was given one to a jail there for a while. I worked one term at Pacific Garden Mission, most famous mission, I guess, of all. Primarily because Billy Sunday and Mel Trotter were saved there. And Billy Sunday, you remember, was a baseball player, one of the fastest men to run the bases of a baseball diamond, they said. Mel Trotter, he was a really down and outer, far down, as some said we had to reach up to touch bottom. He was married and he had a daughter. The daughter became ill. His wife gave him money to go and buy medicine for the daughter, but he took it and bought liquor instead. The daughter died. I don't know if it was because she didn't get the medicine, but anyway, she died, and when no one was looking, Mel went and stole the shoes off of her feet and sold them to get liquor. Well, he was eventually saved at Pacific Garden Mission also. And he went to Detroit, Michigan, and there he devoted the rest of his life working to save such as he had been. Harry Solnier was superintendent there, and he was a big, tall, handsome fellow. I thought a lot of Harry Solnier. I believe his son's in charge now. I was told that Harry was down to just about 100 pounds before he died of cancer. That was hard to believe. Anyway, I liked the mission and the jail work. And when I first went to Kenosha, I tried to get in the jail there, but I was turned down. Without further solicitation, just shortly after that, I was asked to go. For about 25 years, I ministered there in that jail. Kenosha is a city of about 60-some thousand people, about halfway between Chicago and Milwaukee. The jail there, I guess, accommodated about 60 inmates. Probably the average group we went there would be about half or maybe a little more. We had some real conversions there. Of course, not as many as we would like. We lost track of most of them, but a few we did keep track of for a while. Then in 1974, when we moved to Tennessee, I worked there in a much smaller jail. I helped in 2 churches, starting one of them, until we moved from there in 1990. Now here we are in Minnesota. Some people have asked us if this is our permanent home. They mean, do you live here the year round? Many rich people are here for the summer and then they go south for the winter. I'm glad to tell them that this is probably the last move we'll make. But this is not our permanent home. The last move we'll make as far as this world is concerned. And that can't be too much longer. At 84 years of age, we're gradually loosening our tent pegs in old terra firma, and we're looking for that move to our permanent abode. Well, this is my story. If anybody is blessed by it, to God be the glory. Amen.